Three Notched Weekly Preview. We're previewing the Utah State Aggies. They come into this one 1-2 overall, 0-1 in Mountain West play. They were picked to finish near the end, near the back of Mountain West. And last week, they got blown out by Air Force. They ended up putting their backup quarterback in. And once their backup quarterback came in, they actually looked pretty respectable. They have actually a very good rushing attack. They rank 18th in the nation in EPA per game. And offensively, they're not terrible. In total EPA this season, they're 45th in the nation. But defensively, Utah State is not good. They can't really defend against the pass. They're worse against the pass than JMU. And they definitely can't defend against the run. They've allowed 1.04 EPA per game this season against the run. So if you put up together all of the rushes in a game against Utah State, you could expect it to be added at 1 point to the scoreboard. What does JMU need to do to win?
Yeah, I think you've got to continue to play good defense, right? If you can be strong in the secondary, that's a big deal. Utah State, a true freshman quarterback, a little scary, maybe a little PTSD from the UVA game with a true freshman quarterback, but I think JMU can get after the passer and have a lot of success. Air Force seemed to really bully Utah State in the trenches, so that gives me a lot of hope for JMU's performance in this one. I think that'll be the focus, win the line of scrimmage, and then just any ounce of like first down passing, a little creativity on offensive play calling. And I think JMU has a chance to really dominate Utah State's defense. Super winnable game. Maybe the hardest part of this is that it's the third road game in 3 weeks.
And it's in Utah.
Yeah.
A couple more kind of advanced stats I want to dive into around this game that I find very interesting and I want to get your take on. So the Dukes have the 5th best starting field position in the entire nation. Their average start is on the opponent's 41. And defensively, they have one of the best opponent starting field positions. On average, opponents are starting on their own 16, which is actually a bit like wild. This special teams unit is a complete weapon. But despite having the 5th best starting field position, if they were not reclassifying, because they technically aren't in the statistics because they're reclassifying, they'd be the 66th highest scoring offense with 30 points per game. If you only count FBS games, they've scored 26 points per game on average, and that is 81st in the country. Is that something to be worried about?
I'm not concerned because I still think Troy is like a good team. They might only go like 7-5 or something, or maybe they struggle a little bit. I just feel like they're good defensively. I feel like nobody on their schedule is going to do what JMU did in terms of rushing yards, whatever it was, -12. So I don't know. I still think JMU's got a lot more in them, but this is a kind of game here where if they don't show that, I think I'll become like immediately concerned. I just feel like this is a great matchup for JMU on both sides.
It's a great matchup that I'm kind of worried about, though, because this is a Utah State team that has allowed a lot of rushing yards this season. They have been, like you said, bullied in the trenches, but JMU only has a 36.8% success rate on the entire season when they run the football, which is 103rd in the nation. That's not great. And on a per game basis, a negative 1.59 EPA per game. So, like, this rushing attack has not performed well this entire season. Utah State, with their run game, has a 51.2% success rate.
Is this all games?
Yes. This is FBS versus FBS. Sorry.
So it doesn't include the Idaho State shellacking for them.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Then I'd be a little surprised by that based on their that can't be right. That's got to include the FCS, doesn't it? Maybe? Their rushing attack.
Data from ESPN. Oh, it's on it. This is all.
Is
sorry,
it all
this is it's all of them because
okay.
Their net. I'll break down net yards in a little bit, like average yards. That's only FBS versus FBS.
Okay.
But all the data everywhere else is from ESPN.com, so it's all games.
Okay, so I've got their like team page up. They average 4.8 yards per rush against Iowa, which is actually pretty good. 9.27 against Idaho State, and then 2 against Air Force, which Air Force has like a really big time run defense. If you look at yards per play, 4.6 against Iowa, 8.4 against Idaho State, and 4.5 against Air Force. I feel like their stats are like they can score because they dropped 78 on Idaho State. Okay. I will say though, the backup, Hillstead, I believe it is, was pretty good against Air Force, even though it was in garbage time. He played well. He was 18 of 27 for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns with no picks.
That's fair. And I want to break down available yards with you real quick.
Yes.
So correct me if I'm wrong in my explanation. I had to read the explanation of available yards a few times, but essentially what it is it takes the available yards to you. So say you start on the 50-yard line. You can only get 50 yards because that's all that's available to you, because then that's a touchdown. And so then the percentage, the available yards percentage, which is what we're going to talk about, takes the amount of yards you got in that drive. So say you got to the 25, you gained 25 yards, but that's only 50% of what you could have gained. So for that drive, you have a 50% available yard share. So far this season, JMU has gotten a 45.2% of all of their available yards, which is 71st in the nation. That worries me. That isn't great. In 2022, they had a 48.9% they got 48.9% of all of their available yards. This offense, I know we've gone back and forth on ragging on the defense a little bit, ragging on the offense a little bit. Offense has some room to grow.
I would agree. I think the part that maybe gives me like a blind optimism is I think Troy can play good defense. I think they were ultra conservative because they don't think Troy's offense was good. And I wonder how different some of their metrics would be if they started McLeod against Bucknell. They wasted a half where they should have scored.
They wasted 3 quarters,
45 points during that time when they like barely scored, you know?
Today I was just like looking up all these advanced stats and essentially arguing with myself because I'm like I was being a pessimist, and then I would have my optimist point of view. The optimist take on it though is that this season, when you, instead of seeing available yards to the end zone and you move it back 20 yards and you see how often they get to the red zone. So instead of 100 available yards, it's 80 available yards. They've gotten 49.7% of available yards when you're measuring it to the red zone, which is a little bit more kind of exciting.
Yeah, just got to cash in some drives a little more. Well, and some of that too, right, is they decided not to kick field goals against Bucknell. They had those like 4th downs from like the Bucknell 5 where they didn't.
And it also shows like they didn't go for it as often, but they're like getting into opponent's side of the field. So maybe if they do have to be aggressive, they could potentially kind of go for it more. But those are my advanced stats for today that I dug up and spent the time arguing with myself today on.